The stakes were sky high. Dominance of air transport and political prestige in a world careening towards war. And the mighty German Zeppelin Hindenburg was winning. Then, disaster.
It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now.
We live the tragedy of the Hindenburg as modern video techniques reveal startling details hidden in eyewitness films, and experience the giant's last moments with the lucky ones who survived its flames. The Hindenburg, its creation, its promise, its luxury, its fiery destruction.
The airship Hindenburg was the largest thing that ever flew. Its grand presence, 70 times the volume of a present-day blimp, glided overhead at a stately 80 miles an hour. It was nearly 3 football fields in length, surpassing all but the largest ocean liners. At an average cruising altitude of just under 1,000 feet, it awed and delighted all who witnessed its passage. And for those rich enough or skilled enough to cross the Atlantic on it, the cuisine was elegant, the diversions plentiful, and the view unmatched anywhere on the earth below. But on a stormy evening, as it executed another routine landing at the Lakehurst, New Jersey Naval Base, something went desperately wrong.
It burst into flame. And it's falling, it's crazy. Watch it, folks. Get out of the way, get out of the way. Get it started. It's flying, and it's crazy. It's crazy, terrible.
Everything came down, was very noisy. So I thought, out. And I jumped out from the height of 6 or 8 meters.
On that May evening in 1937, the 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen gas that kept the Hindenburg aloft ignited mysteriously and burned in 37 seconds. The world experienced its first tragedy at which the media of radio and film were eyewitnesses, and the direction of aviation technology changed forever.
This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground.
Gigantic Lake Constance separates the Alps of Switzerland from the rolling foothills of Bavaria. Here, near the small German city of Friedrichshafen, rigid airships first took flight. Their creator was Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, who staked his considerable fortune and his reputation on an idea. Rather than fill one airbag with hydrogen, as other aviation pioneers had done, why not fill many airbags and enclose them in a rigid aerodynamic structure powered by on-board engines? The Count was openly ridiculed as a lunatic, but he built his dream. A 416-foot dirigible, or powered airship that could be steered through the sky. He called it the LZ-1. L for Luftschiff, or airship, Z for Zeppelin. On July 2nd, 1900, 3 years before the Wright brothers' first flight, Count von Zeppelin flew the enormous LZ-1 over Lake Constance for 18 minutes. It was propelled by two engines with the combined horsepower of a Volkswagen Beetle. 3 months later, it stayed aloft for an hour and a half.
It was an amazing thing. You look at a picture of it, you see these big weights hanging on the bottom of the ship that they could move forward or aft to get the nose up or the tail up. Great big chunks of lead.
But the LZ-1 wasn't efficient enough to warrant its great expense. Later in 1900, the disillusioned Count had the LZ-1 dismantled and liquidated his airship company. But 5 years later, he was back with a larger, improved LZ-2. It crashed and was destroyed the first time it took to the air.
Count von Zeppelin was like a bulldog. He was very tenacious. Time and again, he was faced with being wiped out because the ships would crash in the very early days, and he always survived with the will to build again.
The brilliant engineer, Ludwig Duhr, worked to give substance to the Count's vision. He would design and build all the Zeppelin Company's subsequent airships, including the Hindenburg.
Power plants plus stabilizing fins plus rudders and elevators were the technological advances that made all this practicality.
By 1908, Duhr and von Zeppelin had created the LZ-4. This fourth great airship made a 12-hour flight to Switzerland and back, and the lunatic Count became a national hero. 1 month later, the LZ-4 set out on a 24-hour endurance flight over Germany. Church bells rang and children danced in the streets when this visitor from the future passed overhead. But late in the flight, engine troubles forced the Count to land the airship near the town of Echterdingen. Here, while the Count and his crew waited in the village for a replacement engine, a summer storm blew the LZ-4 into nearby trees where its hydrogen gas caught fire. The Count hurried to the site.
He arrived on the scene to see the wreckage lying there. And he and his associates more or less came to the conclusion that this was the end.
All of a sudden, people started donating money because the word had gotten out that Count Zeppelin was broke, and he was.
Known as the Miracle of Echterdingen, the German citizenry joined industry in an outpouring of support for their now beloved Count.
I've seen a letter from a little boy who sent 20 pfennigs, which is like a dime, in a letter saying, this is the money that I usually would give to church, but I'm going to send it to you and I hope my father doesn't find out. And it was all these little donations that accumulated into about 6.5 million gold marks, which was an unbelievable amount of money in those days. And with that, Count Zeppelin had the financial backing to create an entire series of companies dedicated to the construction and operation of airships.
Within 3 years, the financially revitalized Zeppelin Company had a small fleet of airships in service, taking adventurers where they had never gone before, into thin air. The Zeppelins offered exquisite sightseeing tours over German cities and countryside.
They were people who came from America, they were British, they were from New Zealand, from any part of the world. I would say only about 20 to 25% of the passengers were actually Germans. Because it was an expensive venture. It was still 100 Reichsmark, which was almost a month's pay to go up once for a half an hour, and their flights were well booked.
The early aeronauts rode in gondolas with mahogany paneling inlaid with mother of pearl. They snacked on pâté de foie gras, beluga caviar, the finest German wines, and French champagne. By 1914, the Count's airships had carried over 10,000 paying passengers, 100,000 accident-free miles. But in spite of this commercial success, the Zeppelin industry and all of Europe was poised on the brink of a military future. In the early days of World War I, German rigid airships were the kings of the skies. Flying at heights of over 11,000 feet, the airships were out of range of ground-based anti-aircraft guns. Bullets from the guns of the primitive aircraft below them were no more than a nuisance. The German military embraced the airship concept, and the Zeppelin company grew.
They built them at the amazing rate of 2 Zeppelins a month. There was something on the order of 100 Zeppelins built during World War I. And as these ships were built, they were naturally improved.
Rivets were counted in the millions, wire in the thousands of miles. But perhaps the most unusual commodity depleted in the manufacture of the huge airships was gold beater's skin, the thin, gas-impermeable lining of the large intestines of cattle. Unlike rubber, gold beater's skin could not hold a charge of static electricity and accidentally cause a hydrogen fire. The skins were meticulously cleaned, then glued to silk panels to create the enormous gas bags. Over 50,000 skins per bag, over 700,000 per Zeppelin.
All the butchers were required, if they killed more than 6 cows per week, to clean the intestines, package them up, and send them to Berlin, because the Zeppelin company had its gas bag production facilities in Berlin. And there were about 1,400 women involved to produce the gas bags for all the airships.
Not a single German airship was lost to enemy fire in all of 1915.
The airships flew over England and had free roam of the territory. They could bomb anything they wanted to. The problem was they weren't doing bombing as what we consider like in World War II. Their bombs were handheld. They simply stuck it out the window and let loose. Their accuracy was minimal. Their damage was minimal. But during the course of the war, the airships developed a system of bomb release, dropping also larger bombs, 500 kilos, and also systems of locating your targets and dropping them.
The British dubbed the Zeppelins baby killers and realized that consequences would be disastrous unless they could defend against them. An arms race ensued. The British employed blackouts, more powerful searchlights, and more powerful anti-aircraft guns. But their greatest successes came with better airplanes, equipped with incendiary bullets.
The bullet would explode, and of course, if it was inside the airship, that's all you needed to ignite the hydrogen. The crew didn't believe in parachutes because that was weight, so that if a ship was hit, usually everybody on board went down with the ship and died.
The Germans responded by building lighter and lighter Zeppelins, capable of operating at altitudes above 20,000 feet. Their black painted undersides were intended to hide them from British searchlights. It wasn't enough. Although he remained active until his last days, Count von Zeppelin grew increasingly disappointed that his airships were now so easily defeated. He died on March 8, 1917. His funeral in Stuttgart was immense. All of Germany mourned. Just 6 months later, a state-of-the-art British fighter plane with a Rolls-Royce engine climbed at 22,000 feet and destroyed the Zeppelin of the commander of the German Naval Airship Division. The first technological race between airplane and airship was over, and the airplane was the winner.
Apresentando Especial de História Viva.
There would have been no Hindenburg without the spectacular success of the U.S. airship, Los Angeles.
Those of us who flew on the Los Angeles thought it was the best airship ever built. I flew in for 5 years and lived for about 14 years and died in bed. We had to take it apart to get rid of it.
The Los Angeles had another name during its construction in Friedrichshafen, the LZ-126. It was the 126th airship designed by the Zeppelin Company and the 116th the company actually built. At the end of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles forbade Germany from constructing any more very large volume Zeppelins. Furthermore, it divided Germany's remaining Zeppelins among the Allied victors as war reparations. But the Germans were one airship short. Hugo Eckener, the charismatic post-war leader of the Zeppelin Company, lobbied to build that missing airship for the United States. He succeeded, receiving a contract for the construction of the LZ-126 and saving the Zeppelin Company from a future of making aluminum pots and pans.
Dr. Eckener was actually a journalist, wrote articles for the local Frankfurt paper. He knew how to use newspeople. He knew how to make good public relations. And that was very important to get funding for his airships.
Eckener's involvement with the Zeppelin Company dated back to the earliest flights of the Count's airships. Eckener had written critical accounts of the LZ-1 and the LZ-2. The energetic Count sought the enemy out. And before long, Eckener became the Zeppelin Company's Director of Public Relations. By 1911, Eckener was a Zeppelin pilot. On his first flight, he crashed the airship Deutschland II. Nevertheless, he soon gained a reputation as the finest airship pilot in the world, one who was both highly skilled and extremely cautious. During the war, he trained airship pilots, and after the war, he won an internal power struggle and gained full control of the Zeppelin Company. Construction of the LZ-126 proceeded without incident. But when the time came to deliver the newest Zeppelin to the United States, Eckener faced a daunting problem. No company would ensure the airship's transatlantic crossing.
Eckener said, I'll put the company on the line. If this flight doesn't succeed and the ship gets wrecked, the company will stand for any costs and liability. So it was either the 126 gets delivered or he's dead in the water.
On October 13th, 1924, Eckener crossed Germany in the LZ-126 and set a course for America. Only once before had an airship crossed the Atlantic, the British airship R-34, but that was in summer. Eckener feared and respected the storms of autumn.
It was said of Eckener that he could smell a storm 100 miles away, and he had literally an uncanny sense for the weather. Some say that was because he spent his formative years sailing on Lake Constance in southern Germany.
Eckener threaded a zigzag course across the Atlantic, skirting storms. On October 15th, he flew the newest Zeppelin over New York City. Later in the day, he landed triumphantly at the naval base in Lakehurst, New Jersey, where a huge new hangar awaited his LZ-126. In an era of international airship competition marked by conspicuous failure, the Los Angeles proved the worth of German construction and operating experience.
The British and the Americans simply never had, first of all, that many ships, that many flights behind them, so that they had learned from their mistakes.
America would build only 3 rigid airships. England 16. Germany, on the other hand, would build 138, most of them of Zeppelin Company design. The mistakes of the latecomers to the airship scene were devastating. The Los Angeles shared the huge Lakehurst hangar with the Shenandoah, the first great American-built airship. After a spectacular 9,000-mile flight around the United States in 1925, the Shenandoah was caught in a Midwest thunderstorm and torn in half.
The ship, a copy of a German Zeppelin, was just not adequately built. 14 men were killed in that out of a crew of about 40.
The British, as well as the Americans, used downed World War I German Zeppelins as models for their own airships, immediately dating their technology. 5 years after the crash of the Shenandoah, the British prepared their gigantic 777-foot-long R-101 for its maiden flight from London to India. Workers had recently cut the huge ship in two and added another airbag in order to lift its lavishly appointed rooms and promenades. Far from India, the heavy, structurally flawed R-101 crashed and burned in the French countryside, killing 48.
The R-101's crash caused the British government to abandon all hope and faith in large airships. So they killed off the entire program, and there's never been another rigid airship considered in Great Britain since.
Next came America's Akron. In 1931, the largest airship ever built. The U.S. naval contract had gone to Goodyear Zeppelin, a subsidiary of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company.
Mr. Litchfield, the head of Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, worked out a deal with the Germans, particularly through Dr. Eckener, that the Germans would come over to the States and be a design and engineering nucleus for Goodyear as they began building the big rigid airships.
The Akron logged over 1,700 hours in the air during 74 flights. It boasted inboard engines and experimented with and then perfected the ability to launch and capture airplanes. But in spite of its innovations and successes, the Akron went down in a thunderstorm over the Atlantic in 1933. It carried no life jackets, and 73 of the 76 naval men on board perished. Nevertheless, in its gigantic Ohio hangar, Goodyear Zeppelin completed work on the Macon, the Akron's sister ship. The Navy held high hopes for the Macon and considered it one of the fastest and finest airships that ever flew. Like the Akron, the Macon was an airborne aircraft carrier, harboring 5 Sparrowhawk fighter planes.
They became so proficient in this that they took the wheels off the airplanes. And the airplanes, from that time on, landed on the Macon.
The Macon, like the Akron, was inflated with non-flammable helium gas, but it went down too, the victim of a structural flaw in the gigantic tail fins. It crashed in the evening off the central California coast in the Pacific. Because the Macon carried life-saving gear, 81 of its 83-man crew survived. The Zeppelin Company's airship, Los Angeles, flew successfully through almost this entire period of peacetime airship disasters. Furthermore, it successfully completed many dangerous experiments. For 3 weeks in 1929, it operated from a mooring on a tanker at sea. It landed on an aircraft carrier. And 2 years before the Akron was completed, the Los Angeles launched and captured fighter planes. In 1932, after 8 years of service, the venerable Zeppelin was retired. But if the Los Angeles wasn't enough to convince the world of the superiority of German airship design and experience, Hugo Eckener had another spectacular success to display, the precursor of the Hindenburg, the Graf Zeppelin. On July 8, 1928, in the Zeppelin Company hangar at Friedrichshafen, Count von Zeppelin's daughter christened the LZ-127 the newest of the German airships. The easing of the Treaty of Versailles' ban on German airship construction and Hugo Eckener's tireless fundraising made the creation of the LZ-127 possible. Known as the Graf Zeppelin, it would fly over 1 million accident-free miles. In the process, the airship and its commander, Dr. Eckener, would achieve almost mythic stature.
Todo domingo, The History Channel apresenta por mundo a vida do Especial de História Viva.
The aircraft that was once voted the most famous in the world was the Graf Zeppelin. It made 590 flights, crossed the ocean 144 times. Now, these figures don't sound very impressive now, but in the 1930s they were.
Perhaps the Graf Zeppelin's most dramatic feat came early in its career. To publicize his dream of a regular transcontinental airship service, Hugo Echner vowed to fly his new airship around the world. The funding for the costly trip would come from William Randolph Hearst, who had exclusive English language rights to the story of the flight, and from thousands of stamp collectors who paid a premium to have Graf Zeppelin postmarked mail with commemorative stamps sent around the globe. At Hearst's insistence, the flight began in America.
Flight of the Graf Zeppelin around the world, which we are about to start, will be the fulfillment of our hopes regarding the airship. We have flown the Graf Zeppelin 3 times across the Atlantic on other trips without any mishap either to passengers or crew. They have convinced me that the airship has passed the experimental stage and that the dirigible is a safe medium for long distances air trips. The ship and crew are ready. In a little while, we will be off in the air on the first trip around the globe by air. Auf Wiedersehen.
For the second leg of the around-the-world adventure, the 59 men and 1 woman, many of them reporters, would set a non-stop distance record for flight. They sailed over Germany, then over the vast, lonely plains of Siberia. In their gondola, high above the rest of their mortal counterparts, the passengers feasted on fine foods and wines. U.S. Naval Lieutenant Commander Charles Rosendahl, true believer in the future of airships, was among them. Outside, a team of mechanics kept the 5 Maybach engines purring in their special diet of gasoline and propane-like blow gas. Other crew members patrolled the outer surface of the Zeppelin, making in-flight repairs if necessary. Echner's Zeppelin traveled 7,000 miles before reaching its destination, Tokyo, Japan. Here, the Japanese celebrated the landing of the first airship they had ever seen with a national holiday.
Hugo Echner often said, "I am not unaware of the psychological impact of flying something 3 city blocks long, 500 feet overhead." So much of his success was due to his ability to play the game psychologically.
Echner left Tokyo on the first non-stop flight across the Pacific. 5,000 miles later, when he finally approached San Francisco's Golden Gate, he slowed considerably. A colleague later asked if something went wrong.
And Echner said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong. I simply wanted to make sure that the people who saw the Graf Zeppelin come through the Golden Gate in San Francisco did so with the sun behind the Graf Zeppelin so it would seem to emerge from the sun."
They flew to Los Angeles, then over the great American desert. Lady Grace Drummond Hay, representing the British press, wrote, "The Graf Zeppelin is more than just machinery, canvas, and aluminum. It has a soul." They passed triumphantly over Chicago, then over New York, finally completing their around-the-world flight at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Echner was the focal point of a ticker tape parade, his second in Manhattan.
Dr. Echner was a very, very well-known person, probably even more so than Charles Lindbergh.
the Italian newspaper held a contest, who was the most famous person in the world today. I guess Mussolini figured he would get named, maybe the Pope figured he'd get named. Hugo Echner was the one who got named.
Toys and games of the period reflect the Zeppelin mania that swept the world. Zeppelins held the promise of a future filled with exotic travel, adventure, and scientific discovery. Less than 2 years after the Graf Zeppelin's spectacular around-the-world flight, Echner took his sturdy airship to the Arctic. This 8,000-mile flight of exploration was again supported by the mail of stamp collectors. While the Arctic flight was a scientific success and did much to keep the Graf Zeppelin in the public eye, it still wasn't the transatlantic passenger service of which Echner had dreamed. For that, he had cast his gaze southward, towards the German colonies in South America. In 1931, the Graf Zeppelin had begun a regular passenger service between Germany and Brazil.
If you were living in Berlin and you wanted to go to Rio, it took you 3 weeks. The Graf Zeppelin held the possibility and the actuality of covering that not in 3 weeks, but in 3 to 4 days.
The South American service of the Graf Zeppelin was so successful that Echner convinced the Brazilian government to build a gigantic Zeppelin hangar near Rio de Janeiro. It would be used by both the Graf Zeppelin and the larger Zeppelin he was contemplating, one that would be known as the Hindenburg. The Graf Zeppelin made a total of 63 round trips to Brazil. During the same period, it made 2 commercial round trips to Lakehurst, New Jersey. The flights became routine. Often Echner's former first officer, Ernst Lehmann, commanded the airship while Echner continued his lobbying for a larger Zeppelin and a more extensive transatlantic service.
Ernst Lehmann was one of the airship pilots in the war, and really a pretty good pilot, too. He liked to play an accordion, and on the Graf Zeppelin, he would get up in what we call the crow's nest, way up in the very tip of the ship, and just make up some music up there playing his accordion.
But the serenity with which the Graf Zeppelin flew belied the turbulence below. The world was in the grip of a devastating economic depression, and the dark force of the Third Reich had gained power in Germany.
Echner got away with murder as far as the Nazis were concerned. He couldn't stand the Nazis.
He was a very outspoken person against the Nazi regime, and his popularity basically saved him from ending up in a concentration camp.
Echner repeatedly snubbed the Nazis. He once denied the powerful party the right to use the Zeppelin Company's huge hangar, capable of holding tens of thousands for a political rally. There was even a movement to draft Echner as a presidential candidate to run against Adolf Hitler. But Echner was entranced with airships, and with his plan for a transcontinental service, he made his deal with the devil.
Echner did not have the money to buy or build new hangars, to build larger airships. The new regime saw to it that he got the money, that the company got the money. But, of course, in so doing, he had to give something up. Goering established something called the DZR, the Deutsche Zeppelin Reederei, which was the operating subsidiary, as distinguished from the airship construction company. And that became highly Nazified.
The legendary Graf Zeppelin that had thrilled and inspired millions with its flights now displayed the Nazi swastika. And in a new, larger hangar in Friedrichshafen, with money from the Nazis, Echner began work on the largest airship ever built, the LZ-129, the Hindenburg.
The Hindenburg was the epitome of everything that they'd learned up until then. All the mistakes were corrected in the Hindenburg.
The Hindenburg would be built to withstand the dangerous weather of the North Atlantic. It would be larger, sturdier, and safer than any rigid airship that had come before. Length, 804 feet, 572 feet longer than a 747 jet, only 78 feet shorter than the Titanic. Height or diameter, 135 feet, as tall as a 13-story building. Weight, 130 tons. Gas capacity, 7 million cubic feet, the volume of more than 300 average American homes. Its light, strong aluminum alloy girders, known as duralumin, if laid end to end, would extend for over 13 miles. Its engine gondolas would house 4 Daimler-Benz diesel power plants capable of producing 1,320 horsepower apiece. Its tail fins would be 105 feet long, like the smaller tail fins of the Graf Zeppelin. Each of them would be emblazoned with a gigantic swastika.
The fact that the Hindenburg was so large really gave the people building it a boost, and the people really were very, very happy and very confident that they were doing a real good job on that thing. They didn't mind talking about it either. They were proud of it.
Workers put the finishing touches on the Hindenburg early in 1936, more than 4 years after the beginning of its construction. The Olympic rings were painted on its sides in anticipation of a planned appearance at the Olympic Games in Berlin later in the year. The still unnamed airship was ready to make history. When the Hindenburg first took flight, the Nazis were in control of the DZR, the German Zeppelin transport company. They were well aware of the political value the great airship possessed. On March 26, 1936, just 3 weeks after its completion, the Hindenburg and the Graf Zeppelin set out on a propaganda tour across Germany. They would pass over every city with a population greater than 100,000 and drop leaflets promoting Adolf Hitler and Nazi Party goals. Ernst Lehmann, not Hugo Echner, was in command of the Hindenburg.
He knew the airships, he knew how to handle them, but there was a little something that was not so good with him. He liked to play up to the Nazi people who were running Germany.
In order that the propaganda tour start on time, Lehmann attempted a dangerous downwind takeoff.
He tried it because he wanted to be in good with the people in Berlin. Net result was they bashed in the lower fin, and the ship had to be free ballooned out over the lake for about 2.5 hours. And they could have lost the ship. It was a bad, bad deal.
When the Zeppelin landed, Echner lashed out furiously at Lehmann and the Nazis. News of his outburst traveled quickly to Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. Echner officially became a non-person. At his next press conference, Goebbels stated of Echner, "In the future, his name may no longer be mentioned in the newspapers, nor may his picture be further used." If Echner was removed from the public eye, his new airship was not. In August, the Hindenburg came in low over the opening ceremonies of the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Its passage was stunning. Perhaps the only view more remarkable than the view from the stadium was the view from the Hindenburg itself.
Und da haben wir nachher das an der Gondel aus alles gesehen. Wir haben zum Beispiel
From the gondola you could see everything. We took part in the Olympic flight to Berlin in 1936. The Olympic flight was a wonderful flight, flying over Berlin, over the stadium. The people looked at the airship more than at what was happening on the ground.
Am Luftschiff, als wie da unten, was da unten geschehen ist, nicht?
A month later, the Nazi Party held a gigantic congress in Nuremberg. Once again, party leaders exploited the Hindenburg to glorify their cause. American newspapers had hinted that the newest Zeppelin would be named the Hitler, but instead, it was named for Paul von Hindenburg, Germany's recently deceased war hero and president.
Hitler had the belief, and so did the Nazi regime, that nothing should be named Hitler or Germany or Deutschland to which anything could happen to it. Hitler wouldn't want his name attached to something that could very well be destroyed.
But the Hindenburg was much more than a Nazi symbol. It was built for transatlantic flight and performed magnificently in 1936. On May 8th of that year, non-person Eckener and Captain Lehman flew it triumphantly over New York City before completing its first transatlantic journey at the Lakehurst Naval Base. Time for the passenger crossing, a record-shattering 61 and a half hours.
I am convinced under all weather conditions, even on the most unfavorable, we will be able to make the flight in all regularity and safety.
In 1936, the Hindenburg completed 10 round trips to the east coast of the United States, always landing at Lakehurst. The German Zeppelin Transport Company paid $40,000 a year to use the naval base and its huge hangar. The newest Zeppelin also completed 7 round trips to Rio de Janeiro, supplementing the Graf Zeppelin's continuing reliable southern service. Air transport across the Atlantic belonged to the Zeppelins, and especially to the Hindenburg.
I realized that at last the commercial airship flying across the Atlantic means something. The Graf Zeppelin was a sort of sporting experiment, but this is something real and concrete. It was wonderful.
I enjoyed every minute of it. The German ship and the German crew were both magnificent. It was a swell fight.
And I can assure you that the greatest thrill of this trip was the fact that transatlantic flying has passed the stage of a hazardous adventure, but has settled down now to a dependable, most comfortable passenger service.
A primeira forma de nos aproximarmos do mundo. Especial de História Viva.
The Hindenburg was a star. Crowds flocked to Lakehurst just to see it. They paid $1.25 for the privilege, considerably less than the $400 one-way ticket from New Jersey to Germany. As a representative of America's Goodyear Zeppelin Company, Harold Dick spent more time aboard the Hindenburg than any other American.
To be on the ship and flying with it from southern Germany to Rio, that's a long haul, and then later on to be flying across the North Atlantic, back and forth from Germany to Lakehurst. The great feeling of satisfaction that the Hindenburg was proving itself that it really was a great means of transportation. Very comfortable, speedy, smooth, everything in its favor.
Jeder war stolz auf das Schiff. Erstens war es das moderne,
Everyone was proud of the ship. It was the more modern, the newer, the stronger ship. And that would naturally make us proud that we were selected to be part of the Hindenburg.
Unlike the exposed gondola of the Graf Zeppelin, the passenger compartment of the Hindenburg was entirely enclosed. Its 2 decks, though occupying only 1% of the volume of the ship, established a new standard of aircraft luxury. The elegant dining room could seat 50.
I would sit down for the meals with some of the passengers, and I would take my fountain pen, which was flat on the end, and I would set it up vertically on the table, and I wouldn't touch it again. And it would stay right there through the whole meal. And at the end of the meal, I would take up my pen and put it back in my pocket. And it would never have fallen over because we had no bumps or vibrations.
The cooks prepared fresh gourmet meals in an all-electric kitchen.
Our life was working on the board, you know. We had 110 people, and we three we cooked the food for 110 people.
For every meal, they had a wine list that would do credit to the finest restaurant in all of Europe. And I don't think you'd hear anybody complain about the food and the setting. They had regular tables, they had regular waiters, their own special pattern of china, and you could buy the little after-dinner cups as a souvenir. And of course, everybody went home with a flock of those.
Passengers slept in 25 two-berth cabins, complete with hot and cold running water and fresh air ventilation.
Wir haben sehr viel zu sehen bekommen. Das ist nicht so wie heute auf dem Flugzeug, dass zum Beispiel
We got to see a lot. It's not like today in an aeroplane that is flying at 10,000 meters where you see nothing but clouds and very little of the earth. We could see practically even the smallest things from the ship. Even a chicken could be recognized without a problem, as well as fishes and whales and sharks, and those we saw frequently over the ocean.
If the view was grand from the rows of picture windows inside the ship, it was even more spectacular outside. Here, a fleet of mechanics climbed into the 4 Daimler-Benz diesel engine gondolas for 2-hour shifts.
In der Gondel war man, wie Sie sagen, allein, Tag und Nacht natürlich.
You were alone in the gondola day and night, of course. And you would watch over the motor and the gauges as well. But we had the advantage that we had a clear view to both sides. And you could, in German you would say, take a visual stroll. Because looking at the motor did no good. You had to have it in your hearing. And that's how you could determine an anomaly.
Da kann man am ersten eine Unregelmäßigkeit feststellen.
The first pair of big engines were mounted more than 90 feet behind the passenger quarters. Inside, their roar was not even a whisper.
It was absolutely quiet. By comparison, I would say this room is quiet, and this is the way it would be the Hindenburg.
In the starboard lounge, passengers listened to music played on an aluminum grand piano. The Hindenburg even boasted a smoking room where passengers could enjoy an international selection of liquors and light up.
Those of us who were indoctrinated to be careful when you're around hydrogen, all we could think of was that 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen over our heads. So I know I never smoked in there. Well, we were plain scared of hydrogen. Germans were not scared of it because they were completely confident of their ability to handle it and handle it safely.
Em meio à Segunda Guerra Mundial, está apresentando Especial de História Viva.
Hydrogen was the silent master of the Hindenburg. The lightest gas in the world is also extremely flammable, but all around were the signs that the Germans had taken pains to keep the demon in its box, to eliminate the possibility that one stray spark could set the entire grand ship ablaze. The all-electric kitchen had no open flames. The engines ran on non-explosive diesel fuel, a huge improvement over the Graf Zeppelin's engines with their highly flammable combination of blau gas and gasoline. The smoking room itself had a single electric lighter attached by cable to the wall. The room was under positive pressure so that no free hydrogen could leak in. The crew, whenever working in the interior of the ship, wore special felt booties so that shoe nail metal would never spark off the ship's duralumin skeleton. And the passengers themselves were required to relinquish all matches and cigarette lighters before boarding the Zeppelin. Still, the threat was there, ever present.
Wir haben ja gesehen am Graf Zeppelin, man ist die ganze Erde, man ist in allen Klimazonen.
We had seen through the Graf Zeppelin that you could fly around the world through various climate zones, and so you had a certain sense of security. But hydrogen is always dangerous, and it was always an odd feeling when you fly through a storm and the lightning bolts will hit around you. And so you wouldn't completely trust this flying gas kettle.
Den fliegenden Gaskessel doch nicht so richtig getraut.
The Hindenburg had been designed for use with helium, a slightly heavier and non-flammable gas. But in the 1930s, virtually the entire world's stockpile of helium belonged to the United States, a byproduct of Texas oil and natural gas wells.
Hugo Echner was a very practical man, a very pragmatic type. And yes, he was worried about the continuing use of hydrogen. He said, I can't help but feel that someday we're going to have an accident. The Germans never really officially asked for the helium. Echner wanted it, but the current regime in Germany did not want to have to go to the United States and say, we haven't got any helium, so we want you to let us have some.
Even if the Germans had asked for helium to fill the Hindenburg in 1936, it's doubtful that the United States would have sold it to them. The Americans feared the Nazi Party, and memories of the World War I baby killers were still fresh. But for the German Zeppelin Transport Company, there were economic reasons for using hydrogen as well as political reasons. Hydrogen was much cheaper than helium, and it had a greater lifting capacity. The Hindenburg, which could accommodate up to 70 passengers with hydrogen, could carry only 40 if filled with helium.
There was a mindset that developed even within the German Zeppelin company that nothing could go wrong. We don't need the helium because we've shown we can operate safely with hydrogen.
As the 1936 flying season drew to a close, the Hindenburg returned to Germany for maintenance, its flying record perfect, its future and the future of intercontinental airship travel bright with promise.
Na remota terra africana, especial de História Viva.
Frankfurt, Germany, possessed many attributes that Friedrichshafen lacked. It was a center of population and a transportation hub. For years, Frankfurt had witnessed the passage of Zeppelins. In 1933, the German Zeppelin Transport Company decided to make Frankfurt its center of flight operations. At the new airport and airship base of Rhein-Main, the Hindenburg already used the recently completed Zeppelin hangar at the end of the 1936 season. But the giant hangar was only the first of 6 huge sheds that were planned, 4 in a quarter circle, a 5th on tracks that could rotate and link up with the other sheds, always allowing the Zeppelins to take off into the wind. The hangars would serve a fleet of intercontinental Zeppelins, grand plans that would be consumed by a 37-second blaze of hydrogen. Already in Friedrichshafen, the Hindenburg's sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin II, was under construction. With minor improvements, it would be nearly a carbon copy of the Hindenburg. future Zeppelins would be even grander.
The next ship was already on the drawing board. The Hindenburg had 7.5 million cubic feet of gas. The next generation would have had 8.5 million. That would have increased your passenger load probably close to 100 passengers.
Eckener and the German Zeppelin Transport Company envisioned an initial fleet of 5 airships. With the financial cooperation of America's Goodyear Zeppelin Company, the fleet would increase to 10, and in less than a decade, 36 to 40 huge Zeppelins would link the population centers of the world. To service the expanding Frankfurt operation, the Zeppelin Company built its own town on the edge of the Rhine-Main airport, Zeppelinheim.
Envisioned was an entire community of about 500 to 600 houses with schools, churches, everything. The first section was built and opened in 1936 when the Hindenburg operations began, and about 90 families' houses were completed.
There was an outside force driving this frenzy of construction at Frankfurt. The Zeppelin Company was involved in a race for supremacy in the skies. The giant airship's competitor was the fixed-wing airplane.
They were facing the challenge of the seaplanes. In 1935, Pan Am opened up the routes to Manila, that is going over Hawaii, Wake, Midway to Manila, using an island hopping system.
Seaplanes had to take off and land on water, limiting their usefulness. But in 1938, the German Focke-Wulf 200 made the first non-stop runway-based passenger flight between Berlin and New York. The Zeppelin fleet would have faced stiff competition, but the direct competition never came. These men on the Lakehurst, New Jersey airfield are witnessing the event that ended the race between airship and airplane.
Nein. Da haben wir keine Angst gehabt.
No. We didn't have any fears. How many flights had I alone done with the ships? The trips to South America, North America that I did? No, we didn't have any fears.
The Zeppelin Company had an ambitious schedule for the Hindenburg in 1937. During the May to November season, it was scheduled to make 18 round trips between Frankfurt and Lakehurst, New Jersey. On May 3rd, the Hindenburg left its Frankfurt hangar with 36 passengers and 61 crew members. For the first time, Captain Max Pruss was in command of the Zeppelin Company flagship.
I knew him from way back when he was just a watch officer on the Graf Zeppelin. He was a wonderful person, and he was a great airship operator. He knew what he was doing, and he had come up through the ranks.
Ernst Lehmann, now head of operations for the German Zeppelin Transport Company, joined Pruss in the control car, but rode as an observer. Neither Pruss nor Lehmann paid particular attention to a new spate of bomb threats to the Hindenburg. In an atmosphere of rising political tension, bomb threats to this symbol of Nazi power had become common. Hugo Eckener, still in charge of Zeppelin construction, remained in Europe.
Die erste Überfahrt 1937, die war normal, aber
The first crossing in 1937, it was normal, but we did have a delay because of strong headwinds. It took us half a day longer to get there. It would usually take between 50 and 60 hours, but this flight took a little longer. But other than that, nothing out of the ordinary happened.
Reaching the east coast of North America, Pruss delighted the passengers with a passage over Manhattan, a regular trip highlight.
Und als wir Manhattan erreichten, macht man...
When we got to Manhattan, we would make a winner's circle around the city. And then the sirens of the ships, as well as those of the skyscrapers, would scream.
news brought the Hindenburg so close to the Empire State Building that his passengers could wave to spectators on the newly constructed building's observation deck. There were plans to use the top of the skyscraper as a Zeppelin mooring mast, never realized. They flew on towards Lakehurst, half an hour away.
Und da sah man dann von Westen her eine Gewitterfront herkommen, eine dunkle Front.
Then we saw a dark storm front coming in from the west, and we were given orders. The captain didn't land, but flew back along the coast to wait out the storm. We flew for several hours with diminished motors, and in the evening around sunset, we got a radio telegram from the airport.
Dämmerung schon bekamen wir Funktelegramm vom Flugplatz.
Commander Charles Rosendahl, a Graf Zeppelin around-the-world veteran, was in charge of the Lakehurst base. 7:10 p.m. Conditions definitely improved. Recommend earliest possible landing. The Hindenburg approached the unstable but clearing conditions at Lakehurst. John Iannacone was a 26-year-old member of the 92-man naval ground crew that routinely landed the Hindenburg. They were joined by 139 civilians who earned $1 a day to help bring the greatest airship ever built down to earth.
Never ceased to amaze me. I mean, how big the thing was. I mean, and how easily it was to land and how easy it was for us to handle it. Everybody had different jobs. Some of the people was on the handling line. Some people were going to take care of the control car, catch it as it got on the ground, and quite a few people worked on the mooring mast.
35-year-old George Watson was the Naval Public Relations Officer that night.
This was the first flight of the season, and we'd already had 10 flights the year before, so it wasn't much of a novelty anymore. And instead of having 200 or 300 press people, we had just some stringers from the local papers and probably about 10 or 15 newsreel and photographers there.
Herb Morrison, a radio reporter from station WLS in Chicago, was in attendance. On this night, he would employ state-of-the-art technology to report the landing of the Hindenburg. He would record his eyewitness commentary on a record-like disc. The disc would be flown to the radio station for later broadcast, but the story Herb Morrison would report would be far different from the story he expected.
What a great sight it is, a thrilling one. It's a marvelous sight. It's practically standing still now. They've dropped ropes out of the nose of the ship, and it's been taken a hold of down on the field by a number of men. It's starting to rain again. As the back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. The flame and it's falling. It's right. Watch it. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get it started. Get it started. It's fire and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between us. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I told you, I can't talk to people. There's fish are on there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. I can hardly breathe. I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.
The Hindenburg disaster claimed the lives of 35 passengers and crew. But incredibly, 62 of those aboard the great Zeppelin had survived.
Wie ich mich umdrehte und guck nach oben, da sehe ich Feuer.
I turned around and looked up. I saw fire over me.
Die Sache ist schlecht.
Oh my, I thought. Now the situation is desperate. You then have many thoughts at the same time. But the biggest thought, of course, is, how do I get out of here?
Neste século, elas decidiram ser muito mais do que... Especial de História Viva.
Time is relative. For the passengers and crew of the Hindenburg, 37 seconds marked the difference between life and death. The survivors would experience those moments again and again for the rest of their lives.
Ich denke halt da zurück an die Zeit und muss ja sagen, das ganze Leben...
I think back to that time and must say that an entire life is luck. You have luck in life. It has always been like this. In every aspect, I have always been lucky.
Richard Colmer was a 24-year-old mechanic who served on the Hindenburg's last flight. During takeoffs and landings, crew members were assigned specific positions so that the ship's weight was evenly balanced. Often they had specific duties as well. The huge lower tail fin housed the rear landing gear. That's where Richard Colmer was.
Ich habe meinen Platz eingenommen, hinter in der Stabilisierungsfläche, habe das Landrad ausgefahren.
I took my position in the stabilization area in the rear. I ejected the landing wheel, and then it only took seconds until the explosion happened, and some of the gas cells fell down burning. I was lucky to get out. I couldn't be in there even for another moment. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it out. Because it all collapsed into itself, and the beams and everything would have struck you dead if you weren't able to get out. Or burned to death. That was my luck. There was no gas in the tail fin area in the back.
Zur Zeit der Anfahrt auf den Flughafen war ich in der Offiziersmesse.
During the approach to the airport, I was in the officers' mess hall and was cleaning up plates from the meal. I was busy cleaning everything up, and while I was doing that, there was the first explosion.
Kam die erste Explosion.
Werner Franz was a 14-year-old cabin boy in 1937, thrilled to be a member of the elite Hindenburg crew.
Ja, das war halt ein unheimlicher Schlag, der durchs ganze Schiff ging.
It was a phenomenal jerk that went through the entire ship, and through the window I immediately saw the glows of fire, a very bright light. And all of my plates fell out of their cabinets because of the shock, because of the drop to the front. And I didn't know what was happening, and I ran out to the gangway, and there I saw that everything was already on fire in the back of the ship. The ship had turned onto its side because of the loss of gas in the rear, and I was practically hanging in the ropes and holding on. It was probably my luck that the water tank in front of me was losing its load because of the ship's position and soaked me with water. I was totally drenched, and when the ship leaned forward again, I ran to the hatch and kicked it open. And I already saw the earth coming toward me, and so I just jumped out.
Und da sah ich aber auch schon den Erdboden auf mich zukommen. Dann bin ich eben rausgesprungen.
With the insulating layer of water, Werner Franz escaped unharmed. 27-year-old mechanic Eugen Bindler was tending one of the engines at the time of the explosion.
Wie ich rausschaue, hat das Schiff von Heck her bis zu meiner vorderen Motorengondel.
As I looked out to see what was happening back there, the ship was already on fire from the stern all the way to my forward engine gondola. I thought that the engine gondola might drop off as the aluminum got soft. My only wish was that we would get quickly to the ground so that we could get out. I then was still able to see the ship's stabilization area at the stern crash to the ground. And then the ship started to bend up because there was still gas in the front of the ship. I held onto the top of the gondola so that I would slide out. And then I must have blacked out for a second. When I came to, I ran away instinctively from the side of the ship, and only as I was running away, when I was about 50 or 80 meters from the ship, the back of my head caught fire from the neck, and I put my hand there, and then my hand was burned. I then laid down with my back in the sand, because I thought my back was on fire, but that wasn't true at all. It was the heat and the radiation from the flames from above the ship.
25-year-old Albert Steffler was one of 4 cooks aboard the Hindenburg on the evening of the disaster.
I thought, out, out, out. And I jumped out and was happy. The high was only 6 or 7 meters. And I ran away, and behind me, just behind me, 5 meters behind me, the airship came down to the floor.
25-year-old Xaver Meyer was also a Hindenburg cook that night.
Überhalb uns hat das Schiff ja schon gebrannt. Das habe ich gar nicht gesehen.
Above us, the ship was already on fire, but I didn't notice this. I realized it when Wolf, another crewman, was running out of the ship, and I ran after him. I was 2 to 5 meters high, and I jumped, and that's how I saved myself.
So habe ich mich gerettet, ne?
A third cook, 21-year-old Alfred Grosinger, was faced with a terrible decision: jump from 40 feet high or ride the flaming Zeppelin to the ground.
Dann hat sich das Schiff noch mal ein bisschen aufgestellt und da hat sich dann langsam nach vorne runtergesenkt. Da habe ich gedacht, jetzt
The ship went up a little bit again, and then the front slowly dropped. And then I thought, now you have to get out. I swung myself outside, my hands released themselves, and I dropped. I thought that my last hour had arrived, but I landed flat on the ground. It was a soft, sandy ground, and I took it upon myself to run away as fast as possible.
With sprained ankles and bruises, Alfred Grosinger hobbled to safety. 3 of the 4 cooks aboard the Hindenburg had survived. Some weren't so lucky. When the Hindenburg's tail crashed, the bow of the Zeppelin turned into a blowtorch of flaming hydrogen.
I ran towards the ship with the other 5 men that was with me. And because we knew by the time we get there, the fire would be out. We were amongst the first to get there. And I saw one man come out of the nose. I mean, he just jumped out. And of course, he was up too high and he got killed. And then there was another man, he walked out of the ship and he didn't have a stitch of clothes on him. The only thing on him was his shoes. Everything was burned on him, all his skin, hair, arms, everything was burned. And then as we got to the passenger compartment, I mean, there was still an old couple still in their compartment, and they were sitting on the bunk. And they didn't know what happened. And we got in there and we said to them, it's time to go, let's get out of here. We walked them out of there. And they weren't even scratched.
Captain Ernst Lehmann would soon die from wounds received that evening. Commander Max Pruss, on the other hand, was horribly burned but would recover. Many observed a particular act of heroism from Naval Petty Officer Bull Tobin.
When the ship started down, all the Navy crew was underneath her, and they all started to get out from under the ship. And Tobin, who saw that the German crew was starting to come out of the bottom of the ship, there, the keel, you could hear him. He had a voice like a foghorn. You could hear him hollering, "Navy men, stand fast." He stopped the Navy crew from running away from the fire and started them back in. They were instrumental in getting quite a lot of the German crew out.
Dr. Raymond Taylor was a local physician as well as the county coroner. From his office, he felt the explosion, then rushed to the site.
When we arrived here, the survivors at the time were taken to the dispensary in the air station. I had instructed my friend that was chauffeuring me that I would give him a syringe loaded with morphine, an opiate, and that he should give them a certain stated amount of the morphine. And I also told him to put an M on the forehead of the people that he had given the morphine to so that the dosage would not be duplicated and possibly cause damage.
In the aftermath of the explosion, Marine sentries were posted around the wreckage. George Watson set up a press headquarters for the reporters streaming to the site of the disaster.
By midnight, I had issued over 400 press passes, so I was pretty busy just doing that. And the newspaper men, of course, were going crazy because the story was over. They were all yelling at me, give us the name of the dead, give us the name of the survivors, tell us why it happened, tell us the whole story.
Most of the Hindenburg crew members found each other. They began to cable loved ones in Friedrichshafen.
Mir selbst fiel dann plötzlich ein, meine Frau wird einen schönen Schreck kriegen, wenn sie das erfährt.
I suddenly remembered that my wife would get quite a scare when she hears about this. And I telegrammed, I am unhurt, Mogele. Mogele was my wife's nickname. And that was probably one of the first telegrams that was sent to Germany. And my wife actually got it before she knew anything about the disaster.
The battle began over the spoils. Immediately, the Germans pressed for the removal of the Hindenburg's secret state-of-the-art diesel engines.
I will say that the Germans didn't keep their engines as big a secret as they tried to. I think we found out enough to know that they weren't that secret anyway.
The next morning, the young cabin boy, Werner Franz, requested permission to try to retrieve from the wreckage a lost watch that had been given to him by his grandfather.
I took him over to the Major of the Marines, and he gave us permission for me to take him in and see if he could find his watch. So we walked in there, and this kid took me on a straight line right into this spot, and there was his watch on the ground. So he picked it up and scuttled out of there, happy as a clam in high tide.
Da habe ich nach dieser Uhr gesucht in meine Unterkunft, also in meine Zelle, die ich da hatte.
I looked for this watch that I had in my room that I had there, and I tried to find a plate or just something in the officer's mess. I found the watch, and I also took a piece of the ship's aluminum with me.
Ein kleines Teil, Aluminiumstück vom Schiff mitgenommen.
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of lonely. I mean, when that happened, there was a lot of excitement here. A lot of things went on. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people died.
The smell of burnt flesh. That was the saddest part. There were so many of them in such short order, and you had burned clothes and burned flesh. And that odor stayed with us for a long time.
Hilda Jedlik was a 23-year-old nurse at the time of the Hindenburg disaster. She cared for the burn survivors at nearby Paul Kimball Hospital.
We didn't like the swastika, but when it came to taking care of patients, it didn't matter where they came from or where they were going. We did our best to make everybody comfortable. The swastika didn't come into the hospital, if I can explain that. It stayed on the ship.
Max Pruss repeatedly relived the final 37 seconds of his flight as commander of the Hindenburg.
He had burns on the face and on his arms, on his chest. And he was trying so hard to tell us what had happened. He struggled to tell us the fire. It blew, and there was leaks, there was water.
In a highly ironic gesture of appreciation, Lakehurst personnel presented this cigarette case to the severely burned Zeppelin captain. It would replace one destroyed on the Hindenburg. In terms of loss of life, the Hindenburg tragedy was not the world's greatest airship disaster. The 35 deaths aboard the Hindenburg were far surpassed by the deaths of 72 American servicemen aboard the Akron and by the deaths of 48 passengers and crew aboard the British R-101. But the Hindenburg represented the world's greatest media airship disaster. The public witnessed the tragedy through film, radio, and photographs and became part of it. The world's love affair with Zeppelins was over.
História Viva.
Hugo Eckener heard the news of the Hindenburg disaster in a hotel room in Austria in the middle of the night. He immediately flew to Berlin to meet with Hermann Göring, the Nazi air minister. Göring told him there should be no talk of sabotage. Furthermore, Eckener and the Germans should cooperate fully with the American inquiry into the event. The Graf Zeppelin had been in the air, returning to Germany from Rio when the Hindenburg caught fire. Eckener grounded the famous airship. He joined the American inquiry after crossing the Atlantic by steamship.
As long as investigation is pending, it is impossible for me to give you any statement or any ideas regarding the causes of the disaster.
The American inquiry and public hearing was followed by a separate German inquiry. Both groups presented essentially the same scenario as the most probable cause of the tragedy. The discharge of static electricity, they concluded, ignited free hydrogen in the Hindenburg that led to the all-consuming blaze. They reasoned that the landing lines tossed to the ground crew in the light rain soon became wet enough to conduct electricity. In fact, the Hindenburg fire started almost exactly 4 minutes after the landing lines hit the earth. The wet lines grounded the huge airship, the inquiry suggested, but its non-conductive outer covering remained ungrounded. And because of the stormy weather at a higher electrical potential, sparks leaped from the duralumin framework to the outer cover, igniting hydrogen that had been freed either by incomplete venting or by a gas leak. The Hindenburg's Commander Preuss, U.S. Commander Rosendahl, and many of the Hindenburg crew members weren't satisfied with the conclusions of the inquiry. They agreed with the opinion expressed by Captain Ernst Lehmann on his deathbed. Sabotage had destroyed the Hindenburg. Richard Colmer and the lower tail fin of the ship was closer to the presumed source of the fire than any other person.
Ich bin der Meinung, da ist Sabotage gewesen. Denn man muss
I am of the opinion that there was sabotage, because you have to consider the entire situation in Germany. We had Hitler at the helm and he only wanted war, right? There was a big swastika on the back, and on exactly this swastika was where it exploded.
I looked up at the airship and I could see along the top of the airship and just forward of the upper fin, I could see this puff of smoke, gray smoke, and I couldn't see any flame at that time, but there was a puff of smoke there.
In fact, most investigators believe that the fire which consumed the Hindenburg started not on the swastika, but forward of the upper fin. Of the many cameras that recorded the tragedy, none caught the moment the fire ignited.
Sabotage theories are a good way to sell books and to make movies. There's no evidence that there was any sabotage. This goes back, however, to the mindset that the Germans had, which was they'd been doing this safely for so many years. If there was something that went wrong with the airship, it had to be an external influence. It couldn't be them and it couldn't be the ship.
But even if the inquiry suggested a very reasonable and well thought out scenario, the fact remains that in Germany at least, the sabotage theory was politically suppressed by a government that wished to appear invulnerable and also wished to avoid copycat terrorist behavior.
Wir haben verboten gekriegt, das damals zu sagen, dass es Sabotage war.
Back then, we were forbidden to say that it was sabotage. But not only me. There are others that think the same today, that they didn't want us to have a World Airship Corporation.
Possible motives of saboteurs included protest against the Nazis and even corporate sabotage from the competition, non-German commercial aircraft companies. Crew survivor Eugen Bentler, who leans toward the static electricity theory, states the lingering question of causation plainly.
Das ist eine Annahme, die hat man auch experimentell nachvollzogen.
This is an assumption that was repeated scientifically, but that is still not proof. The reason sabotage cannot be completely ruled out, it is even written this way in the investigative report, is because the opposite was never proven either.
Das Gegenteil ja auch nicht bewiesen werden konnte.
Over the years, proponents of all theories found one fact indisputable. The Hindenburg burned because it was filled with hydrogen. Never again would a passenger-carrying commercial airship be filled with the gas. The survivors of the Hindenburg crew sailed back to Germany on the steamship Europa. The bodies of the dead would travel on the steamship Hamburg. Before their departure from New York, 10,000 came to mourn at a dockside service. Many honored the dead with a salute that would become all too familiar in the coming years. Hundreds more attended the service at a Frankfurt cemetery. Here, Captain Ernst Lehmann is buried along with his comrades. Harold Dick was in Friedrichshafen when the news of the tragedy arrived.
For the people there in Friedrichshafen, it was just like all of a sudden there had been a death in the family. They were really shook, and you probably didn't have any hope for anything to come up after that. They'd be lucky if they ever kept the airship going.
The Hindenburg's sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin II, awaited completion in the Friedrichshafen hangar. Help now came from an unexpected source. Air Minister Hermann Goering, who always disliked the huge Zeppelins, decided that a German failure was unacceptable. The Graf Zeppelin II should be converted for use with helium, and the transatlantic service re-established. The Zeppelin Company immediately began the conversion, attacking the problems with vision ingenuity. But the United States still controlled the world's helium supply. Eckener directly lobbied the U.S. Congress and President Franklin Roosevelt.
About that time, Hitler was really getting rambunctious. This is 38. World War II was only a year off. And Harold Ickes, who was the Secretary of the Interior, who controlled helium, refused to approve the helium sale because he was concerned whether the helium might be put to use in some kind of a military purpose.
The Graf Zeppelin II flew anyway, but it was filled with hydrogen and never carried any commercial passengers. Again, the Nazis used the great Zeppelin for propaganda purposes. And to Eckener's embarrassment, it was adapted for use in spying missions. With the outbreak of war in September of 1939, the hydrogen-filled giant became a liability. Goering ordered both the Graf Zeppelin II and the original Graf Zeppelin deflated. For a short time, they were a kind of museum in their Frankfurt hangars. But in March of the next year, Goering ordered that both Zeppelins be demolished. Their duralumin frames would be melted down and used in Nazi fighter planes. A similar fate met the great Frankfurt hangars.
The two sheds here at Rhein-Main were blown apart due to the fact that they were basically in the middle of the runway. The sheds down in Friedrichshafen, although they were camouflaged, were bombed several times by the Allies. The Zeppelin company was responsible for making the outer casings to the V-2 rockets, which meant that Friedrichshafen was a heavy target during the war.
By the war's end, Germany had no rigid airships and no airship sheds in which to build anew. The age of the Zeppelins had passed. Hugo Eckener survived the war and in 1947 came to the United States as a consultant for the Goodyear Aircraft Corporation. After 6 months, he returned to southern Germany. Until his death in 1954, he maintained that static electricity had caused the Hindenburg disaster. With its tight control of the world's helium supply, the United States made good use of lighter-than-air vessels as convoy escorts in World War II. Unlike the great Zeppelins with their rigid skeletons, these were blimps, essentially controllable bags of gas. They were small compared to the Zeppelins. The largest were less than a tenth of the size of the Hindenburg, but they were effective. Not a single ship escorted by the blimps suffered the impact of an enemy torpedo, and only one of the 168 American airships fell to enemy fire.
I was privileged to be part of the Navy blimp program, where we hunted German U-boats in the Atlantic, but they too now are gone.
Today, airships have a restricted military use as airborne radar and observation platforms. They are stable and have great range and endurance. But most modern blimps are the familiar craft used for advertising. They still have the power to excite observers, even if most of them contain only a small fraction of the volume of the Hindenburg. Their mechanical and electrical sophistication makes them much easier to handle than the huge Zeppelins of the past. Like the World War II blimps, they are non-rigid structures given form by the helium they contain. In Friedrichshafen, the industrial empire born from Count von Zeppelin's vision has survived as the Zeppelin Metal Works. Here, almost 60 years after the Hindenburg disaster, the company is building a new Zeppelin. It is called the Zeppelin NT, for new technology.
We found that a 12-passenger, 2-ton payload configuration would be about the smallest size. It would make sense economically. So, believe it or not, this ends up with being an airship the size of a 747 in length and even bigger in diameter.
High-strength aluminum alloys and carbon fiber composites will replace duralumin. And mechanical agility, demonstrated in this 35-foot proof-of-concept model, will replace muscle power. But like the earliest Zeppelins, the Zeppelin NT will be used for sightseeing.
As a passenger, you have a completely new experience. You have ample window space, and you're not zipping by the points of interest. You can slow down. The engines are far away from the passenger gondola, and it's all quiet. You sit up there and take your time to watch things, and I think it's a very pleasant experience that way.
Like its predecessor in the 30s, the modern Zeppelin company has ambitious plans for its new Zeppelin. The hope is for an initial fleet of 12 airships, followed by a fleet of 40 even larger craft. Still, these new Zeppelins will never approach the size or uniqueness of the Hindenburg. It was a giant that left a giant's imprint on our culture. History marks its tragic end, but its spirit still lives in the hearts of those who knew the greatest airship best.
Die Erinnerung verblasst ja langsam, gell? Obwohl noch sehr, sehr viele
The memory is slowly fading away,
Wir sind die Fahrten
but there are many, many images still inside me.
Südamerika,
The flights, the acquaintances in South America, the acquaintances in North America, that will always stay with me somehow.
während der Fahrt.
And the images during the flight, so varied that you actually cannot even imagine, that will always somehow continue to live inside me.